The morning Vanessa asked me to help with her parents' mortgage, she was wearing that little black dress that used to make my heart skip. Now I realize she was just dressing for the part, the loving wife manipulating her devoted husband. "Alex, honey," she said, sliding her manicured fingers across the kitchen counter where I was reading the newspaper. "I need to talk to you about something important." I looked up from my coffee, noting how her voice had that sweet, syrupy tone she only used when she wanted something expensive. After 15 years of marriage, you learn to recognize the warning signs. But like an idiot, I thought I was being paranoid. "What's up, Van?" I asked, folding the paper. Outside our suburban Cleveland home, the morning sun was painting everything golden, the kind of perfect moment that makes you believe life is good. She sat down across from me, her blue eyes wide and sincere. "It's about Mom and Dad. They're really struggling with their mortgage payments, and I'm worried they might lose the house." Evelyn and George Morrison had always treated me like I was good enough for their daughter. Barely. George would grunt his hellos at family gatherings, while Evelyn would make passive-aggressive comments about my blue-collar background. But they were Vanessa's parents, and I'd learned to tolerate their attitude for the sake of family peace. "How bad is it?" I asked, already knowing where this conversation was heading. "They're 3 months behind," Vanessa said, reaching across to touch my hand. "Alex, they're too proud to ask for help directly, but they're scared. Really scared." I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. All I saw was my wife of 15 years, the mother of my daughter Mia, looking genuinely concerned about her parents, the woman I'd fallen in love with when she was just a college girl working at the campus bookstore. "What kind of numbers are we talking about?" I asked. "The remaining balance is about 80,000, she said quietly. "I know it's a lot, but with your contracting business doing so well, and my social media consulting bringing in decent money, $80,000. It wasn't pocket change, but she was right. My construction company had been doing well. We'd just finished a major commercial renovation project, and I had enough in savings and investments to cover it without destroying our own financial security. "Alex," she continued, "I know it's asking a lot, but they raised me. They put me through college. They've always been there for us when we needed them." That last part was a stretch. When Mia was born, Evelyn had criticized everything from the hospital we chose to the name we picked. When I'd started my construction business, George had made snide comments about manual labor and suggested I should aim higher. But family is family, right? "If we do this," I said slowly, "I want to handle all the paperwork. I want to understand exactly what we're getting into." Vanessa's smile was brilliant. "Of course, you're so much better with that stuff than I am." She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "This is why I love you, Alex Foster. You take care of everyone." Over the next 2 weeks, I dove into the mortgage details. The house was a nice colonial in Shaker Heights, worth about $280,000. The original mortgage had been $200,000, and they'd paid it down to $80,000 over the years. The monthly payments were $1,200, which seemed manageable for George's pension and Evelyn's part-time job at the library. When I asked Vanessa why they were struggling, she explained that George had some unexpected medical bills, and Evelyn had reduced her hours to take care of him. It all sounded reasonable. I called my lawyer, Janet Carter, who'd handled our business contracts for years. Janet was sharp as a tack and had been friends with my late father back when he ran his own construction business. "Alex," she said when I explained the situation, "I want to make sure you understand what you're doing. Are you paying off their mortgage as a gift, or do you want some kind of legal protection?" "What do you mean?" "Well, if you're just writing them a check for 80 grand, that's it. The money's gone, and you have no claim on the property. But if you want to structure this differently, we could set it up so that you have some legal interest in the house until they pay you back." I thought about it. Vanessa's parents had never been particularly grateful for anything I'd done for the family. But then again, This was supposed to be a gift, an act of generosity. Asking for legal protection seemed petty. "Let's keep it simple," I told Janet. "I'll pay off their mortgage directly to the bank. Clean slate." "Your call," Janet said. "Just make sure you get everything in writing and keep all the documentation." That evening, I sat down with Vanessa to go over the plan. We were in our living room, Mia upstairs doing homework, the house quiet and peaceful. "So I'll wire the money directly to their mortgage company," I explained. "The whole balance gets paid off, and your parents own the house free and clear." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Vanessa curled up next to me on the couch. "You're amazing, you know that? Not every man would do something like this for his in-laws." "They're family," I said simply. "And it's the right thing to do." She kissed me then, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. My successful business, our comfortable home, our smart daughter, and my beautiful wife who appreciated my generosity. I was living the American dream. The next morning, I made the wire transfer. $80,000, gone in a few keystrokes. The bank confirmed receipt, and by afternoon, the Morrison family mortgage was officially paid in full. Vanessa called her parents to give them the good news. I could hear Evelyn crying with relief over the phone, and even George's gruff voice seemed to crack with emotion when he thanked me. "Alex," George said when Vanessa handed me the phone, This is incredibly generous. We won't forget this." "Just take care of yourselves," I told him. "That's all the thanks I need." That weekend we drove over to celebrate. Evelyn had made her famous pot roast, and George actually shook my hand at the door, the warmest greeting I'd ever received from him. "To family," George said, raising his beer bottle in a toast. "To family," I echoed, clinking my bottle against his. Looking back now, I realize that was probably the last genuine moment I had with any of them. Everything that came after was just an elaborate performance, and I was too trusting to see it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At that moment, sitting around their dining room table, watching Vanessa laugh at her father's stories and Mia helping her grandmother in the kitchen, I felt like I'd made the right choice. I'd secured my wife's family home and strengthened our bonds. What I didn't know was that I'd just paid for the rope they were planning to hang me with. The first sign something was wrong came about a month after I'd paid off the mortgage. Vanessa had always been social. Girls' nights out, coffee dates with her influencer friends, networking events for her social media business. But suddenly, she was out almost every evening. "Where are you going tonight?" I asked one Tuesday as she applied lipstick in our bedroom mirror. "Meeting with Amber and Jess," she said without looking at me. "We're planning a collaboration for this wellness brand." Amber and Jess were part of Vanessa's circle of wannabe influencers, women in their 30s who spent their days taking photos of their coffee cups and posting inspirational quotes over sunset pictures. I'd never particularly liked them, but they were Vanessa's friends, so I kept my opinions to myself. "Will you be late?" I asked. "Probably. Don't wait up." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, leaving me standing in our bedroom wondering when our conversations had become so brief and businesslike. Mia noticed it too. At 15, she was sharp as a whip and had inherited my tendency to observe people carefully. "Mom's been weird lately," she said one evening as we sat at the kitchen table working on her algebra homework. "Weird how?" "I don't know. Secretive, I guess. And she's always on her phone, even when she's home, like constantly texting someone." I helped Mia work through a particularly tricky equation, but her words stuck with me. Vanessa had always been active on social media. It was her business, after all. But lately, she seemed glued to her phone in a way that felt different. That Saturday, I decided to surprise her with lunch at her favorite cafe. She'd mentioned meeting Amber there to discuss some project, so I figured I'd pop in and say hello. The cafe was busy, filled with the usual weekend crowd of families and couples. I scanned the room looking for Vanessa's distinctive blonde hair and finally spotted her in a corner booth. But she wasn't with Amber. She was with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, muscular, with the kind of artificially perfect tan that screamed gym membership and protein shakes. He was leaning across the table, his hand covering hers, both of them laughing at something he'd just said. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. Maybe it was innocent, a business meeting, a friend I hadn't met. But something about their body language, the intimate way they were sitting, the way Vanessa kept touching her hair and smiling, made my stomach clench. I backed out of the cafe before they could see me. That night, I asked Vanessa about her meeting with Amber. "Oh, it was good," she said casually, not looking up from her laptop. "We made some real progress on the wellness campaign." "Just you and Amber?" "Yeah, just us girls. Why?" I could have confronted her then, should have probably, but I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe the guy had been Amber's friend, and Vanessa had just forgotten to mention him. Maybe I'd misread the situation entirely. So I said nothing. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Vanessa's girls' nights became more frequent. She was always checking her phone, always smiling at messages I couldn't see. She started working out more, buying new clothes, getting her hair done more often. "You look great," I told her one morning as she prepared for another mysterious meeting. "Thanks," she said, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm trying to step up my game for the business." "Business is going well." "Really well, actually. I might need to start traveling more for client meetings." Traveling. That was new. I called my buddy Curtis, who'd been my business partner before I'd expanded enough to work mostly solo. Curtis had a talent for reading people, came from years of dealing with difficult clients and subcontractors. "Want to grab a beer tonight?" I asked him. "Sure thing. Everything okay? You sound off." "Just need to talk to someone." We met at Murphy's, a dive bar near my old neighborhood where the beer was cheap and the music wasn't too loud. Curtis was already there when I arrived, his weathered face creased with concern. "So, what's eating you?" he asked after we'd ordered. I told him everything, the mortgage payment, Vanessa's changed behavior, the man at the cafe. Curtis listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of his beer. "How long you been married?" he asked when I finished. 15 years. "Kids?" "Mia. She's 15. Curtis was quiet for a moment, staring into his beer. "Alex, I'm going to tell you something, and you're not going to want to hear it." "Go ahead." "Your wife's having an affair." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, even though I'd been thinking the same thing. Hearing it said out loud made it real in a way that my suspicions hadn't. "You don't know that for sure," I said. "Brother, I've been married 3 times. I know the signs, the sudden interest in appearance, the mysterious meetings, the phone secrecy, the emotional distance. She's seeing someone. Maybe it's just... And the timing's interesting, don't you think? Right after you drop 80 grand on her parents' house, she starts acting different. Like maybe she got what she needed from you." That thought had been lurking in the back of my mind, but I'd been pushing it away. The idea that Vanessa had manipulated me into paying off her parents' mortgage as part of some larger plan seemed too calculated, too cruel. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "Get proof," Curtis said simply. "Before you do anything else, get solid proof. Because once you accuse her, there's no taking it back." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Vanessa slept beside me. Or pretended to sleep. I couldn't tell anymore. The woman I'd been married to for 15 years suddenly felt like a stranger. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out the truth, whatever it cost me. I started with the obvious stuff. When Vanessa left her laptop open, I glanced at her browser history. When she took long showers, I checked her phone, though it was password protected. I followed her a few times, always staying far enough back to avoid detection. What I found wasn't smoking gun evidence, but it painted a clear picture. The browser history showed searches for restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in nearby cities, and, most damning, several visits to a website for a local gym called Elite Fitness. The gym connection led me to do some digging. Elite Fitness was owned by a guy named Trevor Lane, tall, muscular, artificially tanned. The same guy I'd seen her with at the cafe. I drove by the gym a few times and eventually spotted Vanessa's car in the parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon when she'd told me she was meeting with a potential client. I sat across the street for 2 hours until she emerged, not in workout clothes, but in the same dress she'd worn to leave the house. Trevor walked her to her car, and they kissed goodbye. Not a friendly peck, but a long, passionate kiss that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. I had my proof. But instead of confronting her immediately, I decided to dig deeper. If Vanessa was capable of deceiving me about an affair, what else might she be lying about? The mortgage payment had been her idea, her urgent request. What if that was part of the deception too? That weekend, while Vanessa was at another business meeting, I drove over to her parents' house. I needed to see them, to gauge their behavior, to figure out if they were part of whatever was happening or just innocent bystanders. Evelyn answered the door with a surprised smile. "Alex, what a nice surprise. Come in, come in." The house looked good. Fresh paint in the living room, new furniture in the kitchen, a big screen TV in the den. For people who'd supposedly been struggling with mortgage payments, they seemed to be doing pretty well. "Where's George?" I asked. "Oh, he's at the golf course. Joined the country club last month. Says he's earned the right to enjoy retirement." The country club. That was expensive, easily a few $1,000s in initiation fees plus monthly dues. Not exactly the behavior of people who'd been facing foreclosure. "How's his health?" I asked, remembering Vanessa's explanation for their financial troubles. Evelyn looked confused. "His health? He's fine. Why do you ask?" Vanessa mentioned he'd had some medical bills. "Medical bills?" Evelyn laughed. "Alex, George hasn't been to the doctor for anything more serious than a physical in years. He's healthy as a horse." I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. The medical bills had been Vanessa's explanation for her parents' mortgage troubles. If that was a lie, what else had she made up? "Well," I said carefully, "I'm just glad everything worked out with the house payments." Evelyn's expression changed slightly. "Yes, that was very generous of you. Though I have to say it came at the perfect time for Vanessa's plans." "Her plans?" "Oh, you know, the renovations she wants to do, making space for—" Evelyn stopped abruptly, as if she'd said too much. "Making space for what?" "Nothing. Nothing. I shouldn't have said anything. That's between you and Vanessa." But the damage was done. Vanessa had plans for her parents' house, plans that apparently required renovations and making space for something or someone. Plans she hadn't bothered to discuss with the husband who'd just paid off the mortgage. I left the Morrison house with more questions than answers, but one thing was becoming clear. The mortgage payment hadn't been about helping struggling parents. It had been about something else entirely. That night, I confronted Vanessa about Trevor. "I know about the gym owner," I said as she got ready for bed. She froze, her hand halfway to her jewelry box. "What are you talking about?" "Trevor Lane, Elite Fitness. I saw you together." For a moment, she looked genuinely panicked. Then her expression hardened. "You've been following me?" "I've been trying to figure out why my wife has been lying to me." "I haven't been lying." "Really? Because I drove by the gym yesterday and saw you kiss him goodbye." Vanessa sat down on the edge of our bed, her shoulders sagging. For a moment, I thought she was going to confess everything, apologize, maybe even try to work things out. Instead, she looked up at me with cold eyes and said, "So what if I did?" So what if I did? Those 5 words hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. I'd expected denial, tears, maybe even anger, but this cold indifference was worse than anything I could have imagined. What do you mean, so what? I asked, my voice barely steady. Vanessa stood up and walked to her dresser, calmly removing her earrings as if we were discussing the weather. I mean exactly what I said, Alex. So what if I kiss Trevor? So what if we're seeing each other? What are you going to do about it? The casualness of her betrayal hit me harder than any screaming match would have. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake she regretted. This was calculated, deliberate, and she clearly didn't care that I knew. How long? I asked. How long what? Don't play games with me, Vanessa. How long have you been having an affair? She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before. Contempt. Pure, undisguised contempt. About 6 months, she said. Since right after you agreed to pay off Mom and Dad's mortgage, actually. Funny how the timing worked out. 6 months. While I'd been working extra hours to make sure we could afford the mortgage payment, while I'd been proud of my generosity toward her family, while I'd been planning our anniversary dinner, she'd been sleeping with another man. Why? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Why? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Look at yourself, Alex. Really look. You're a 41-year-old contractor who thinks paying off mortgages makes him a hero. You're boring, you're predictable, and you're so desperate to be the good guy that you never see what's right in front of your face. Each word was like a knife between the ribs. I thought you loved me. I loved what you could provide, she said simply. The house, the financial security, the respectability. But love? Alex, I haven't been in love with you for years. I sat down heavily on our bed, though I was beginning to realize it wasn't really our bed anymore. What about Mia? What about our family? Mia will be fine. Kids adapt. And as for our family, she shrugged. Families change. People move on. Move on to what? A future with a gym owner? Trevor's not just a gym owner. He's got plans, ambitions. He's opening 2 more locations next year, and he's looking into franchising opportunities. He's going places. Unlike me, was the unspoken implication. I was just a contractor, a blue-collar guy who'd maxed out his potential. So what happens now? I asked. Now we figure out how to end this marriage with minimal drama. I'll want the house, obviously, and half of everything else. Your business assets, savings, investments. Mia can choose who she wants to live with, but I think we both know she'll choose stability. The house. Of course she'd want the house. The house I'd worked 15 years to pay for, the house where I'd taught Mia to ride a bike in the driveway, the house that represented everything I'd built. And if I don't agree to your terms? Vanessa smiled, and it was the cruelest expression I'd ever seen on her face. Then things get messy. Custody battles, asset disputes, lawyers' fees that eat up everything we've worked for. Is that really what you want? I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 15 years and realized I didn't know her at all. The Vanessa I'd fallen in love with, or thought I'd fallen in love with, had been an act, a performance designed to secure her future. Now that she had what she needed, the mask was coming off. I need time to think, I said finally. Take all the time you need, she said, turning back to her dresser. But don't take too long. Trevor and I have plans. I walked out of our bedroom and down the hall to my home office, closing the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I sat down at my desk and tried to process what had just happened. My marriage was over. That much was clear. But something about Vanessa's attitude, her confidence, the timing of everything, made me think there was more to this than just an affair. The mortgage payment, her parents' mysterious financial troubles that turned out to be non-existent, the renovations Evelyn had mentioned, it all felt connected somehow. I opened my laptop and started researching. If Vanessa thought she could manipulate me into paying for her parents' house and then discard me like yesterday's newspaper, she was about to learn that I wasn't as stupid as she assumed. The first thing I discovered was that Trevor Lane had filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago. His first gym had failed spectacularly, leaving him with massive debts and a ruined credit rating. Elite Fitness was technically owned by a holding company, and when I dug deeper into the corporate filings, I found something interesting. Evelyn Morrison was listed as one of the company's officers. Vanessa's mother was financially involved with her daughter's lover's business. That couldn't be a coincidence. I kept digging, following paper trails and cross-referencing public records. What I found made my blood run cold. 2 weeks after I'd paid off the Morrison mortgage, Evelyn and George had taken out a home equity loan against the house I'd just freed from debt. They'd borrowed $120,000 using the property as collateral, but the money hadn't gone to them. According to the loan documents, the funds had been transferred directly to Trevor Lane's holding company, an investment in Elite Fitness expansion. I sat back in my chair, the full scope of the betrayal finally becoming clear. This hadn't been about helping struggling parents or even about Vanessa's affair. This had been a con game from the beginning. Vanessa had convinced me to pay off her parents' mortgage, not to save them from foreclosure, but to free up the equity in the house. Once the mortgage was gone, they could borrow against the property and funnel that money to Trevor's business. I hadn't just paid for their house. I'd unknowingly provided the capital for my wife's lover's gym empire. And now, with the divorce, Vanessa would try to claim half of everything I owned while she and Trevor used my money to build their future together. It was brilliant, in a sociopathic kind of way. And it might have worked if I hadn't started asking questions. I printed out all the documents I'd found and organized them into a neat folder. Then I called Janet Carter. "Janet, it's Alex Foster. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning, and I need you to prepare for the nastiest divorce case you've ever handled." "Alex, what's going on?" "My wife's been running a long con, and I've got the paperwork to prove it. How quickly can we freeze our joint assets?" "If you've got evidence of fraud, we can file for an emergency injunction." "Alex, are you sure about this?" I looked at the folder full of documents, thought about Vanessa's contemptuous smile, remembered her casual dismissal of our 15-year marriage. "I'm sure," I said. "And Janet, when we're done, I want them to know exactly who they tried to screw over." The next morning, I got up early and made breakfast for Mia before she left for school. Vanessa was still asleep, or pretending to be, so it was just the two of us in the kitchen. "Dad, are you okay?" Mia asked, studying my face with the same analytical intensity I'd passed on to her. "You look like you didn't sleep." "Just some business stuff I'm working through," I said, not wanting to drag her into the mess until I had to. "Is it about Mom?" I paused in the middle of flipping her pancakes. "Why would you ask that?" "Because she's been acting weird for months, and last night I heard you two talking. Well, not talking exactly. More like discussing things in very quiet, serious voices. 15 years old, and she was already too smart for her own good. Mia, your mom and I are going through some difficulties right now. I want you to know that whatever happens between us, it has nothing to do with you. We both love you more than anything." She was quiet for a moment, cutting her pancakes into precise squares the way she'd done since she was little. "Are you getting divorced?" I could have lied, could have bought myself more time before having this conversation. But Mia deserved honesty, even if her mother was incapable of it. "Probably," I said. "I'm sorry, kiddo." "Is it because of the guy with the yellow Camaro?" I nearly dropped the spatula. "What guy with the yellow Camaro?" "The one who's been picking Mom up sometimes when she says she's going to meetings. I've seen him from my bedroom window. He's got really big muscles and really white teeth." "Trevor. Of course he drove a yellow Camaro. It probably matched his fake tan." "You don't miss much, do you?" I said. "I get it from my dad," she said with a small smile. So what happens now? Now I make sure your mother and her boyfriend learn that actions have consequences. Mia nodded solemnly. Good. I never liked her new friends anyway. They're fake. After Mia left for school, I drove to Janet's office with my folder of evidence. She listened to my explanation with growing amazement, occasionally asking for clarification or making notes. This is incredible, she said when I finished. They basically used you as an unwitting investor in a business venture, then planned to divorce you and take half your assets on top of it. Can we stop them? We can do better than that. We can destroy them. Janet's eyes were bright with the kind of professional excitement that comes from having a slam-dunk case. The fraud is clear and documented. We can not only freeze your joint assets, but we can go after the money they've already stolen. What about the house? She said she wants it in the divorce. Janet smiled. Alex, after what I'm going to do to her in court, she'll be lucky if she can afford a studio apartment. We spent the next 3 hours planning our strategy. By the time I left Janet's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Vanessa thought she'd played me for a fool. She thought I was too boring, too predictable, too desperate to be the good guy to fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she was. That evening, I came home to find Vanessa in the kitchen, cooking dinner like nothing had changed. She was humming to herself, actually seeming happy for the first time in weeks. How was your day? She asked without looking up from the stove. Productive, I said. Very productive. Good. I've been thinking about our conversation last night, and I want you to know I don't want this to be ugly. If we handle things maturely, we can both come out of this okay. Absolutely, I agreed. I'm all for handling things maturely. She turned to smile at me, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, Alex. I was worried you might try to make things difficult. Why would I do that? I asked. After all, we're family, and family should take care of each other. I used the same words I'd said when I agreed to pay off her parents' mortgage. If Vanessa caught the irony, she didn't show it. Exactly, she said. Family first. Family first, I echoed. Tomorrow, she was going to find out exactly what that meant. The next morning started like any other, except for the envelope I'd left on the kitchen counter next to Vanessa's coffee cup. She was running late, as usual, grabbing her phone and keys while trying to apply lipstick in the reflection of the microwave. What's this? She asked, picking up the envelope. Just some paperwork you should look at when you have time, I said casually, buttering my toast. She stuffed the envelope into her purse without opening it. I'll check it later. I'm meeting Trevor for lunch to go over the new gym plans. Of course she was. Have fun, I said. She kissed my cheek, the audacity of it still amazes me, and headed out the door. I waited until her car was out of the driveway, then called Janet. The papers are served, I said. How long before the asset freeze takes effect? The judge signed the emergency order an hour ago. Her accounts are already frozen, and we've filed liens against the Morrison property. She won't be able to access any joint funds until the fraud investigation is complete. And the criminal charges? The district attorney is reviewing the case. With the evidence you provided, I'd say charges are likely within the week. I felt a grim satisfaction. Vanessa thought she was meeting Trevor to plan their future with my money. Instead, she was about to discover that their house of cards was collapsing. My phone rang around noon. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen. Alex. Her voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. I'm at work. Can it wait? No, it can't wait. I'm coming to your office. She hung up before I could respond. I called Curtis, who was working on a kitchen renovation across town. Can you swing by my office? I asked. Vanessa's on her way over, and I have a feeling this conversation might get interesting. On my way, Curtis said. Want me to bring the camera? Curtis had started recording difficult client meetings after a contractor we knew got sued by a homeowner who claimed he'd agreed to work that was never discussed. It had become a habit to document potentially problematic conversations. "Good idea," I said. Curtis arrived 15 minutes before Vanessa did, setting up his phone to record from a discreet angle. When Vanessa walked into my office, her usual composure was cracking around the edges. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, pulling the legal papers from her purse. "Divorce papers," I said calmly. "I thought that's what you wanted." "Don't play stupid with me, Alex. Asset freeze? Fraud investigation? What are you trying to pull?" Curtis cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'm Curtis Williams, Alex's business partner. I'm here as a witness to this conversation, which is being recorded for legal purposes." Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger. "Turn that off. This is a private conversation between husband and wife." "Actually," I said, "according to the papers you're holding, we're soon to be ex-husband and ex-wife, and given that you're under investigation for fraud, I think having a witness is prudent." "Fraud? Are you insane? What fraud?" I opened my laptop and turned it toward her, showing the bank records I'd compiled. "The fraud where you convinced me to pay off your parents' mortgage so they could immediately take out a home equity loan and funnel the money to your boyfriend's business." Vanessa's face went pale. "That's not... You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You needed capital for Trevor's gym expansion, but his credit was shot from his previous bankruptcy. So you came up with a plan. Get your husband to pay off your parents' mortgage, then use the equity to secure a loan for Trevor's business. Pretty clever, actually." "It wasn't like that." "Really?" "Because I have all the paperwork right here. The home equity loan application, filed 2 weeks after I made the final mortgage payment. The transfer of funds to Trevor's holding company. Your mother's signature on the corporate documents making her an officer in his business." Curtis whistled low. "Damn, that's cold." Vanessa turned on him. "This is none of your business." "Actually, it kind of is," Curtis said. "Alex borrowed against his business to come up with that 80 grand, so in a way, you stole from me too." "I didn't steal anything. That money was an investment." "An investment I never agreed to," I said. "You lied about your parents' financial situation, lied about the purpose of the mortgage payment, and used my money to fund your affair partner's business. That's textbook fraud." Vanessa sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. For a moment, she looked genuinely defeated. Then her expression hardened again. "You can't prove I planned any of this," she said. I opened another folder and spread out printed emails, text messages, and phone records. "Actually, I can. Your phone carrier keeps records of all text messages, and with a court order, they're quite helpful. Would you like me to read some of your conversations with Trevor about the plan?" Her eyes widened. "You went through my phone records?" "Once fraud became apparent, yes. My lawyer was very thorough." I picked up one of the printed pages. "Here's a good one from 3 months ago. Alex is so predictable. Just need to play up the family crisis angle and he'll write the check." And this one. "Once the mortgage is clear, your mom can get the equity loan and we'll have enough to open the second location." Curtis shook his head. "Lady, you really put it all in writing?" "There's more," I continued. "Text messages about how boring and gullible I am, discussions about divorce strategy, even complaints about having to pretend to be a loving wife until the money came through." Vanessa was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "How did you... The phone records are private." "Not when there's evidence of fraud." The court order was very comprehensive. I leaned back in my chair. "You know what the really stupid part is? If you'd just asked for a divorce 6 months ago, you would have gotten half of everything legitimately. But you got greedy." "I want to call my lawyer," she said quietly. "Good idea. You're going to need one, preferably someone who specializes in criminal defense." She stood up abruptly. "This isn't over, Alex." "You're right," I said. "It's just getting started." After she left, Curtis and I sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, he spoke. "You know, I've seen some nasty divorces, but this is something else. She really thought she could just walk all over you. 15 years of marriage, I said. 15 years, and I never saw it coming. Maybe you didn't want to see it. Sometimes we ignore red flags because we want to believe in people. That afternoon, I picked Mia up from school and took her for ice cream. It was time to have the full conversation about what was happening. "So, Mom's in trouble?" she asked after I'd explained the situation in age-appropriate terms. "Yeah, kiddo. She made some bad choices, and now there are consequences." "Will she go to jail?" "I don't know. Maybe. That's up to the courts to decide." Mia was quiet for a while, stirring her ice cream thoughtfully. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you sad? About Mom, I mean?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm sad about what I thought we had. I'm sad that the marriage I believed in wasn't real. But am I sad that it's ending? No, not anymore." "Good," she said firmly. "Because she was mean to you, and you deserve better." "Thanks, sweetheart. What about you? Are you okay with all this?" "I'm okay. I mean, it's weird and everything, but I'd rather live with you anyway. Mom's been different lately. Like she was pretending to be nice, but wasn't really nice, you know? Kids see everything. I should have remembered that." That evening, Vanessa came home looking haggard. She'd clearly spent the day meeting with lawyers and trying to figure out her options. "We need to talk," she said. "I'm listening." "My lawyer says you're being vindictive, that you could have handled this quietly without involving the police." "Your lawyer is right. I could have. But you made one crucial mistake, Vanessa." "What's that?" "You underestimated me. You thought I was too boring, too predictable, too desperate to be liked to fight back. You thought I'd just roll over and let you take everything." "Alex, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we don't have to destroy each other." "We?" I laughed. "There is no we. You destroyed we when you decided to steal from me to fund your boyfriend's business. It wasn't stealing. It was complicated. No, it was simple. You saw an opportunity to use me, and you took it. The only complicated part is explaining it to a jury." She sat down at our kitchen table, the same table where she'd asked me to help her parents, where we'd planned family vacations, where we'd helped Mia with homework for years. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to know that the boring, predictable husband you thought you could manipulate is smarter than you gave him credit for. And I want Trevor to learn that stealing from other people's marriages is a dangerous game." Trevor didn't know. Trevor knew exactly what he was doing. I have text messages between you two discussing every detail of the plan. Vanessa put her head in her hands. "This is going to ruin everything." "Yes," I said simply. "It is. Just like you tried to ruin me." The next morning, I woke up to find Vanessa gone. Her clothes were missing from our closet, her toiletries cleared out of our bathroom. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Alex, I'm staying with my parents until this gets sorted out. I hope you're happy with what you've done. V." I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. Then I made breakfast for Mia and myself, and for the first time in months I felt like I could breathe freely in my own house. But the real confrontation was still to come. Because Vanessa and Trevor weren't the only ones involved in this scheme, and I wasn't done collecting debts. 2 days after Vanessa moved out, I got a call from George Morrison. His voice was strained, lacking the gruff confidence I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "Alex, we need to talk. Can you come over?" "About what, George?" "You know damn well what about. This legal mess you've created. Evelyn's been served with papers. There are liens on our house, and our lawyer says we could be facing criminal charges." "Sounds like you need better lawyers," I said. "Don't be a smartass. Get over here, now." I almost laughed. Even facing fraud charges, George was still trying to order me around like I was the hired help. Some things never change. "I'll be there in an hour," I said. I called Janet first to let her know about the meeting, then drove to Curtis's current job site. "Want to take a ride?" I asked. "The in-laws want to have a conversation." Curtis wiped his hands on his work shirt. "This should be interesting. You want backup?" "I want a witness. And bring the camera." The Morrison house looked different now that I knew the truth about it. What I'd once seen as a comfortable family home now looked like the centerpiece of an elaborate con game. The fresh paint, the new furniture, the country club membership, all paid for with money they'd borrowed against the house I'd freed from debt. George answered the door, and I could see immediately that the stress was getting to him. His face was drawn, his usual pompous demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. "Alex," he said, not acknowledging Curtis. "Come in." "Curtis is with me," I said. "He's here as a witness. This is a family matter." "George, I'm not family anymore. Your daughter made that very clear. So this is a business matter, and I conduct business with witnesses present." Evelyn was sitting in their living room, tissues scattered around her chair, her eyes red from crying. She looked up when we entered, and I saw something I'd never seen from her before. Genuine remorse. "Alex," she said softly. "I'm so sorry. This got so out of hand." "Evelyn, don't say anything," George warned. "Our lawyer said—" "I don't care what the lawyer said," Evelyn snapped. "This is wrong, George. What we did to Alex is wrong, and I can't live with it anymore." Curtis set up his phone to record while I took a seat across from them. The same living room where we'd toasted to family after I paid off their mortgage now felt like a courtroom. "So," I said, "who wants to explain how this really worked?" George crossed his arms defensively. "We don't have to explain anything to you." "Actually, you do. See, the district attorney is very interested in this case. Fraud involving $80,000 gets their attention, but they're willing to consider plea deals for people who cooperate." Evelyn looked at her husband with disgust. "Tell him, George. Tell him how this was all your idea." "Evelyn, no, I'm done protecting you." She turned to me, tears flowing freely. "Alex, George came up with this plan after Vanessa started seeing Trevor. He said we could use the situation to our advantage." "How so?" "Trevor needed money for his business expansion, but his credit was terrible from the previous bankruptcy. Vanessa was already talking about leaving you, but George said we should wait, that we could get more out of it." Curtis shook his head. "Cold. George suggested that we ask you to pay off our mortgage first, then take out a home equity loan and invest in Trevor's gyms. He said it was a win-win. We'd get a return on our investment, and Trevor would have the capital he needed." "And what about me?" I asked. George finally spoke up. "You were going to lose half your assets in the divorce anyway. At least this way, the money stayed in the family. Except I'm not family, remember? You've made that very clear over the years." "You know what I mean." "No, George, I don't think I do. Explain it to me." He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Look, Vanessa was unhappy. She deserved a chance at happiness with someone who could appreciate her. Someone like a bankrupt gym owner with a criminal record. Trevor's record is just some bar fights from when he was younger. And the embezzlement charge from his previous business?" George's mouth fell open. "What embezzlement charge?" I pulled out another folder. I'd been carrying a lot of folders lately. Trevor Lane was charged with embezzling money from his previous gym's employee pension fund. The charges were dropped when he agreed to pay restitution, but it's all public record. Evelyn went pale. "George, you said you checked him out." I did some research." "Apparently not enough," Curtis said. "Lady, your son-in-law just gave you better due diligence than your husband did." "Ex-son-in-law," I corrected. "So what happens now?" Evelyn asked. "Now you have some choices to make," I said. "The district attorney wants to prosecute everyone involved in the fraud. That includes you, George, Vanessa, and Trevor. but they're willing to consider deals for people who cooperate and make restitution. What kind of restitution? George asked. Full repayment of the $80,000 I paid on your mortgage, plus interest and legal fees. And you'll need to testify about how the scheme was planned and executed. We don't have $80,000, Evelyn said. Then you'll need to sell the house. The words hit them like a physical blow. George actually staggered backward. This house has been in my family for 30 years, he said, and it would have been lost to foreclosure if I hadn't paid off your mortgage, or so you claimed. Turns out that was just another lie. We weren't actually behind on payments, Evelyn admitted. We were managing fine. The whole financial crisis story was George's idea. To manipulate me into paying off your mortgage so you could borrow against the equity. Yes. Curtis let out a low whistle. Ma'am, that is some next-level scheming. I never wanted to do it, Evelyn said, looking at her husband with disgust. I told George it was wrong, that you'd been good to us over the years. But he said you'd never find out, and even if you did, you wouldn't do anything about it because you were too nice. Too nice, I repeated. Seems like everyone had me figured wrong. George tried one last time to assert control. Alex, be reasonable. We're family. We can work this out without involving lawyers and courts. George, let me explain something to you. For 15 years, you've treated me like I wasn't good enough for your daughter. You've made snide comments about my background, my education, my profession. You've never missed an opportunity to make me feel small. I'm not finished. Despite all that, when your daughter asked me to help you save your house, I didn't hesitate. I liquidated investments, took out loans against my business, and handed over $80,000 because I thought it was the right thing to do. I stood up, looking down at both of them. But it was all a lie. You were never in trouble. You never needed my help. You just saw an opportunity to steal from the blue-collar guy who wasn't smart enough to see it coming. Alex, please, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sell this house and pay me back every penny, with interest. You're going to testify against Trevor and provide evidence of how this scheme was planned, and you're going to do it quickly, because the longer this drags out, the more likely it becomes that you'll be sharing a cell with your daughter. Evelyn was sobbing openly now. Where will we live? I don't know, and I don't care. Maybe you can rent a place with the money you've been spending at the country club. George's face was red with anger and humiliation. You can't do this to us. We're old people. You're old people who committed fraud. Age doesn't make you immune to consequences. Curtis packed up his camera while I gathered my papers. As we headed for the door, Evelyn called out, Alex, wait. What about Mia? She's our granddaughter. This will hurt her too. I turned back to face her. Mia is smart enough to understand that actions have consequences. She's also smart enough to know the difference between right and wrong, something the adults in her family seem to have forgotten. Please, isn't there some way? Evelyn, you had a choice. When George came up with this scheme, you could have said no. When Vanessa started her affair, you could have stayed out of it. When I paid off your mortgage in good faith, you could have told me the truth. You made your choices. Now live with them. We left them sitting in their living room, surrounded by the furniture they'd bought with stolen money, in the house they were about to lose, facing criminal charges for a scheme that was supposed to make them rich. As we drove away, Curtis shook his head. Remind me never to get on your bad side. I'm not vindictive, I said. I'm just done being everyone's doormat. What's next? Next, we pay a visit to Trevor. I want to see how tough he is when he's not hiding behind my wife. Curtis grinned. Now this should be fun. Trevor's gym was exactly what I'd expected, all chrome and mirrors, with motivational posters featuring impossibly muscled models and slogans like "No excuses" and "Pain is weakness leaving the body." The irony wasn't lost on me that a man who'd built his business on stolen money was surrounded by messages about hard work and dedication. Curtis and I walked in during the afternoon rush, when the gym was packed with people trying to squeeze in workouts between their real jobs. Trevor was holding court near the free weights, wearing a tank top that showed off his artificially enhanced physique, surrounded by a group of admirers hanging on his every word about proper protein intake. He spotted me immediately, and I saw his expression shift from confusion to recognition to something that might have been fear. He excused himself from his audience and walked over, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "Alex, right? Vanessa's husband." His voice was deeper than necessary, the kind of forced masculinity that screamed insecurity. "Ex-husband," I corrected. "And you're Trevor Lane, the man who's been sleeping with my wife and spending my money." The gym went quiet. Nothing stops a workout like the promise of real-life drama. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble," Trevor said, glancing around nervously at the crowd that was pretending not to listen. "Too late for that," Curtis said. "You should have thought about trouble before you decided to steal from people." "I didn't steal anything." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of screenshots I'd prepared. "Because I have text messages between you and Vanessa discussing how to maximize the take from the boring husband. I have bank records showing the $80,000 I paid for her parents' mortgage being immediately converted into a loan for your business. I have corporate documents showing you as the beneficiary of money obtained through fraud." Trevor's tan seemed to fade a shade. It wasn't supposed to be fraud? Because that's exactly what it was. You conspired with my wife and her parents to steal $80,000 from me to fund your business expansion. The money was an investment I never agreed to make, an investment obtained through lies and deception. That's called fraud, Trevor, and fraud is a felony. The crowd around us had given up any pretense of working out. Phones were coming out, recording what was clearly about to become the most entertaining thing to happen at Elite Fitness in months. "What do you want?" Trevor asked quietly. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You thought you could steal from me, sleep with my wife, and ride off into the sunset with my money. But you made one crucial mistake." "What's that?" "You assumed I was too weak to fight back." I gestured around the gym. "Nice place you've got here. Shame you're about to lose it." "What are you talking about?" Curtis stepped forward. "Well, see, when you obtained the money for this place through fraud, that makes it proceeds of a crime. And proceeds of crimes get seized by the government. It's called asset forfeiture." Trevor's eyes widened. "You can't do that." "Actually, we can't," I said. "But the FBI can, and they will, as soon as the criminal charges are filed." "Criminal charges? Did I forget to mention? The district attorney is very interested in your case. Fraud involving $80,000, conspiracy, money laundering. You're looking at some serious federal time, Trevor." He was sweating now, despite the gym's air conditioning. "Look, maybe we can work something out. I can pay you back." "With what? The business you built with my money? The equipment you bought with funds obtained through fraud? Everything you have is tainted, Trevor." A woman in yoga pants whispered to her friend, "Is this better than Netflix or what?" "Please," Trevor said, his voice cracking. "I've got employees, people depending on this place. You should have thought about that before you decided to build your empire on stolen money." "It wasn't my idea. Vanessa and her father, they came to me with the plan. I just went along with it." Curtis laughed. "Oh, so you're the victim here? Poor Trevor, forced to accept $80,000 in stolen money." "I didn't know it was stolen." I pulled out another document. "Really? Because I have a text message from you to Vanessa saying, 'Make sure the husband doesn't figure out where the money's really going.' That sounds like you knew exactly what was happening." Trevor looked around desperately, as if hoping for support from his gym members. Instead, he found a room full of people recording his humiliation with their phones. "What do you want me to do?" he asked finally. "I want you to confess. I want you to provide evidence against Vanessa and her parents. I want you to cooperate fully with the investigation, And I want you to understand that when you mess with people's families, there are consequences. And if I do all that, then maybe the prosecutor will consider a plea deal that doesn't involve decades in federal prison. Trevor's shoulders sagged in defeat. This is all messed up, man. I never wanted it to go this far. But it did go this far. You made choices, Trevor. You chose to get involved with a married woman. You chose to participate in a scheme to defraud her husband. You chose to build your business on stolen money. Now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. I turned to address the crowd that had gathered. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that this gym was built with money stolen from me through an elaborate fraud scheme. The owner, Trevor Lane, conspired with my ex-wife and her parents to trick me into paying off their mortgage so they could borrow against the equity and fund this business. The crowd murmured with shock and disgust. Several people were already heading for the door. The FBI will be seizing this facility as proceeds of criminal activity within the next few days. I'd recommend finding alternative workout arrangements. Trevor grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. You can't destroy my life like this. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Trevor, you destroyed your own life the moment you decided to steal from me. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. Curtis stepped between us. I'd take your hand off him if I were you, unless you want to add assault charges to your legal problems. Trevor released my arm and stepped back. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said simply. You just haven't accepted it yet. As we walked out of the gym, I could hear the buzz of conversation behind us. By tomorrow, everyone in the fitness community would know about Trevor's crimes. His reputation, like his business, was finished. That felt good, Curtis said as we got in my truck. It felt necessary, I corrected. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because people need to understand that actions have consequences. What's next? Next, we go home and have dinner with my daughter, and then we wait for the dominoes to fall. The dominoes didn't take long to fall. Within a week, Trevor's gym was closed, yellow tape across the doors, and FBI seizure notices posted in the windows. Vanessa and her parents were arrested on fraud charges. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly I was fielding calls from reporters wanting to know about the mortgage fraud scheme that destroyed a family. I didn't talk to the reporters. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Mia took it all surprisingly well. I'm proud of you, Dad, she said one evening as we watched the news coverage. You stood up for yourself. Sometimes that's all you can do, I said. Do you think Mom will go to prison? I don't know. That's up to the courts, but she'll have to face the consequences of what she did. Good, Mia said firmly. She hurt you, and people who hurt the people we love should face consequences. Smart kid. She definitely got that from me. 3 months later, Vanessa called from jail. She'd been denied bail due to flight risk concerns. Apparently, the prosecutors had evidence she'd been planning to leave the country with Trevor before their arrests. Alex, she said, her voice small and defeated, I need your help. I'm listening. My lawyer says if I cooperate fully and provide evidence against Trevor and my parents, I might be able to get a reduced sentence. But I need character references, people who can testify that I'm not usually like this. And you're calling me because you knew me better than anyone. You know I'm not a bad person, not really. I just made some terrible mistakes. I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about 15 years of marriage, about the woman I'd thought I'd known, about the elaborate deception that had destroyed our family. Vanessa, I said finally, I don't know you at all. I thought I did, but the woman I married wouldn't have been capable of what you did. So no, I can't provide a character reference because I have no idea what your character actually is. Alex, please. You made your choices, Vanessa. Now live with them. I hung up the phone and never looked back. 6 months later, the trials were over. Trevor got 8 years in federal prison for fraud and money laundering. George got 3 years, and had to surrender his pension to pay restitution. Evelyn got probation and community service in exchange for her cooperation. Vanessa got 5 years, with the possibility of parole in 3 if she maintained good behavior. The house in Shaker Heights was sold to pay restitution. I got my $80,000 back, plus interest and legal fees. The rest went to Trevor's other victims. Apparently, I wasn't the only person he'd defrauded over the years. Mia and I moved to a smaller house in a better school district. She was thriving academically and had made new friends who didn't know anything about the scandal. Sometimes I caught her looking at me with something that might have been pride, and I realized that maybe losing everything had been worth it if it meant gaining my daughter's respect. One evening, as we sat on our new front porch watching the sunset, Mia asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Dad, do you ever regret it? Fighting back, I mean?" I thought about it carefully. "No," I said finally. "I regret trusting people who didn't deserve it. I regret not seeing the truth sooner, but I don't regret standing up for myself when it mattered." "Good," she said, "because you taught me something important." "What's that?" "That being nice doesn't mean being weak, and that sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do." I smiled and put my arm around my daughter. "Where'd you learn to be so smart?" "I get it from my dad," she said. As the sun set over our new neighborhood, I reflected on everything that had happened. A year ago, I'd thought I had the perfect life: successful business, beautiful wife, lovely daughter, comfortable home. It had all been built on lies, but I hadn't known that then. Now I had something better: the truth, and the knowledge that when everything fell apart, I'd found the strength to fight back. Vanessa had been wrong about me. I wasn't too boring, too predictable, or too weak to defend myself. I was just smart enough to pick my battles and strong enough to see them through to the end. And in the end, that made all the difference.